The silence in the penthouse was heavy, broken only by the sound of the rain hitting the glass. Kwan Ho sat in his velvet chair, looking at the bandage I had just placed on his side. He looked like a king, even with blood on his shirt. He was a handsome Korean man, likely in his early 30s, with sharp black hair and eyes that seemed to see right through me. I stood there in my gray maid's uniform, my long dark braids hanging over my shoulder, feeling like a tiny bird caught in a trap. My hands were still shaking from the shock of what he had asked me to do. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "There are 1,000 women in this city who would kill for that ring. Women who speak your language and know your world. I am just the person who cleans your floors." Kwan Ho leaned forward, the light from the lamp making his shadows grow long on the marble floor. "I do not need a woman who knows my world," he said, his voice deep and calm. "I need a woman who can survive it. Tonight, when those men came for me, my guards ran. My friends hid. But you didn't even blink. You grabbed a kit and saved my life while the bullets were still warm in the walls. That is a strength that cannot be bought, Kaelie." I looked down at the massive diamond on my finger. It was beautiful, but it felt like a lead weight. I thought about Zaire, my sweet boy with his weak lungs, sleeping just a few rooms away. Every breath he took was a struggle, and the hospital bills were a mountain I could never climb alone. I knew Kwan Ho was dangerous. I knew he was the dragon, the man who ruled the streets with an iron fist. But as I looked into his dark eyes, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't just about a wedding or a contract to save his reputation. "You didn't just pick me tonight, did you?" I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Kwan Ho didn't look away. A small, dark smile touched his lips. "I have watched you for a long time, Kaelie. I know how you take your coffee. I know what songs you hum to Zaire when he can't sleep. I know you are the only person in this city who isn't afraid of the dark because you have lived in it your whole life." He stood up, towering over me in his disheveled black suit. He moved like a shadow, stopping just inches from me. The air between us felt thick and hot. He reached out and touched the edge of my braid, his fingers gentle but his gaze possessive. "You think you are paying a debt to me by saving my life?" he murmured, his face partially in the dark. "But the truth is, I am the one who is in debt to you. You gave me a reason to want to stay alive. Now I will give you everything you have ever dreamed of. But in return, you must walk into my world and never look back." I felt a shiver go down my spine. It wasn't just fear. It was a strange, forbidden pull. He had been watching me, learning me, waiting for the perfect moment to claim me. I was no longer just the maid who vanished into the background. I was the dragon's chosen bride, and the debt I owed him was going to cost me everything I used to be. I looked at the rain-soaked city below us and knew that from this moment on, my life was no longer my own. The next morning, the gray cotton of my maid's uniform was gone. In its place, several women I did not know arrived at my small room in the staff quarters. They moved quickly and did not smile. They brought boxes filled with high-fashion silk and shoes that cost more than I had made in a year. I felt like a doll as they pulled my long dark braids into a sharp, elegant style and painted my face. When they finally draped a heavy midnight blue silk gown over my shoulders, I hardly knew the woman in the mirror. She looked powerful and rich, but her eyes were still the eyes of a mother who was afraid for her son. As I walked through the long, gold-leafed hallways of the mansion to find Kwan Ho, the air felt different. The other workers, people I had eaten lunch with just yesterday, stopped what they were doing to watch me pass. They did not wave or say hello. Instead, they bowed low, their faces turned toward the floor. But as I passed, I heard the sharp, stinging whispers that they thought I could not hear. "Look at her," one maid hissed to another near the grand staircase. "She was scrubbing toilets yesterday. Now she thinks she is a queen because the boss had a bloody night." "It won't last," a guard whispered back, his voice cold. "A woman like that doesn't belong in a house like this. She is just a replacement for the senator's daughter. Once the dragon is bored, he will throw her back to the streets where he found her." The words hurt more than I wanted to admit. I clutched the silk of my skirt, my knuckles turning white. I wanted to tell them that I didn't want this, that I was only here to save Zaire. But I knew they wouldn't listen. In their eyes, I was an outsider who had stolen a throne. I found Kwanho in the dining room. He was dressed in a sharp, dark suit, his black hair perfectly in place. He looked up from his coffee, and for a moment his eyes softened as they took in my transformation. He stood up and walked toward me, the heavy sound of his boots echoing on the marble. He didn't seem to care about the whispers of the staff. He only had eyes for me. "You look like you were born for this, Kaelie," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "Your people hate me," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "They think I am a joke." Kwanho reached out and took my hand. The massive diamond on my finger caught the light. "Let them whisper," he said, his gaze turning hard as he looked toward the servants in the hall. "They bow to you because they fear me. Soon they will bow because they fear you too. You are the dragon's wife now. No one in this house or this city will ever look down on you again." The morning light hit the white marble floors of Kwanho's private study, making the room feel cold and sharp. I had wandered in while he was at a meeting, my heart hammering in my chest. On his heavy oak desk sat a thick folder with a name written in bold, black ink. Zaire. My breath caught. I opened it, expecting to see more terrifying photos of our old life. Instead, my eyes blurred with tears as I looked at the papers inside. They were receipts. Every single hospital bill from the last 6 months was there. The expensive specialists I could never afford. The rare medicine that kept Zaire's lungs clear. Even the debt I had owed to the local clinic was all stamped with a red seal that said paid in full. Kwanho hadn't just been watching me from the shadows. He had been keeping my son alive. I felt a rush of relief so strong it made me dizzy. But beneath it, a new fear took root. I looked at the dragon crest on the top of the folder. In the world of the Mafia, nothing was ever a gift. Every cent he spent on Zaire was a golden chain pulling me deeper into his world. I was no longer just a maid or a bride. I was a woman who owed her son's life to the most dangerous man in Asia. The peace did not last through the night. That evening, the air at the high society charity gala was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and quiet judgment. The room went silent the moment Kwanho entered with me on his arm. I was wearing a dress of midnight silk, but I felt like an intruder in a room full of snakes. A tall, gray-haired man stepped forward, his face twisted in a sneer. It was the senator, the man whose daughter had fled the altar. "You bring a servant to a place for kings, Kwanho," he barked, his voice echoing off the gold walls. "She is a stain on your family name. A common girl who cleans floors has no place among us." The crowd murmured in agreement, their cold eyes landing on my skin and my simple braids. I felt small, ready to pull away, but Kwanho's grip on my waist tightened until it almost hurt. He stepped into the light, his obsidian eyes turning lethal. "This woman is my wife," Kwanho's voice boomed, turning the room into an icebox. "She is the queen of the dragon clan. If any of you think she is a stain, then you are calling me a stain. And we all know what happens to those who insult the dragon." The senator turned pale, his hands trembling as he backed away. The room dipped into a terrified silence. For the first time, I realized that being the dragon's wife meant I wasn't just protected. Die was a weapon he was ready to use against the world. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The luxury of the penthouse felt like a cage. While walking down the hall, I noticed a hidden seam in the wall behind a tall bookshelf. I pushed it, and a door swung open into a small, freezing room filled with glowing blue monitors. My legs felt weak as I realized what I was looking at. Every screen showed a different part of my old life. There I was at the grocery store 3 months ago, holding Zaire's hand. There was a video of us at the park, and even a photo of me sleeping in our tiny, cramped apartment. It wasn't just protection, it was an obsession. Kwanho had been following my every move long before the night of the attack. He had mapped out my schedule, my fears, and my dreams. He hadn't chosen me because I was there. He had waited for the perfect moment to trap me. I realized then that the dragon didn't just want a bride, he wanted to own every second of my existence. The nightmare finally broke into the real world the next morning. A beautiful gold-wrapped box was delivered to Zaire's nursery. Thinking it was a toy from Kwan Ho, the young nanny reached for the ribbon. But as she touched it, I saw a faint, bitter green vapor leaking from the edges. Lay it down. I screamed, tackling the nanny to the floor just as a sharp hissing sound filled the room. It was a poison gas trap hidden inside a child's gift. I scrambled toward Zaire, who was crying in his crib, covering his face with my silk robe to keep him from breathing the air. Within seconds, the door was kicked off its hinges. Kwan Ho burst in, his gun drawn, his face a mask of pure demonic rage. He saw the gas. He saw me shielding Zaire, and he saw the senator's crest hidden on the bottom of the box. He knelt beside us, his hands shaking as he touched Zaire's head. "The senator has declared war on a child," he growled, his voice vibrating with a hunger for blood. "He thinks he can hurt me through you. But he forgot one thing. I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let them touch what is mine." After the gas attack in the nursery, Kwan Ho's face never lost its cold, hard look. The next morning, he did not send me to the garden or the library. He led me down to a cold concrete room in the basement. The walls were covered in sleek black mats, and a row of handguns sat on a silver table. "I cannot be with you every second," he said, his voice echoing. "The senator knows Zaire is my heart. That makes you his target. You must learn to bite back." He stood behind me, his chest pressed against my back as he guided my arms. He taught me how to hold a heavy pistol, his large scarred hands steadying my shaking ones. The air in the room felt tight and hot. It wasn't just the fear of the weapon. It was the way he looked at me like I was a beautiful blade he was finally sharpening. When I finally hit the center of the target, he leaned into my ear. "Good," he whispered. "Never let them see you sweat, Kaelie. In this world, the person who fires first is the one who goes home to their child." A week later, it was time for my official debut as the dragon's wife. We arrived at a hidden mansion on the outskirts of Seoul where the heads of the city's 5 biggest syndicates were waiting. I wore a dress that looked like liquid gold, but I felt like I was wearing armor. Kwan Ho sat me at the head of the long table, right next to him. A rival boss, a man with a jagged scar across his throat, leaned forward and blew smoke in my direction. "She's pretty, Kwan Ho, but can a maid really hold the keys to the city?" he mocked. I didn't wait for Kwan Ho to answer. I remembered the training. I looked the man right in the eye and pushed a small velvet box across the table. Inside was a list of his secret offshore accounts that Kwan Ho's hackers had found that morning. "The keys to the city are easy to hold," I said, my voice calm and low. "It's your secrets that seem to be slipping through your fingers." The room went silent. Kwan Ho reached over and squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes shining with a dark, proud fire. The victory was short-lived. As we walked back to the car, a woman stepped out from the shadows of the pillars. She was beautiful, with pale skin and a dress that cost more than my old apartment building. It was Na, the senator's daughter, the bride who had run away. "You really think you can just replace me with a servant?" She laughed, her voice sharp and mean. She looked at my skin and my hair with pure disgust. "Kwan Ho is playing a game, honey. He doesn't love you. He's using you to spit in my father's face. Once the war is over, he'll throw you away like a dirty rag." I felt a sting in my chest, a doubt that I had been trying to hide. I looked at Kwan Ho, but his face was a mask of stone. "You chose to leave Na," he said coldly. "Kaelie didn't steal your spot. She earned it by staying when everyone else ran. Now, get out of our sight before I forget that we were once engaged." Na hissed a curse at me, promising that I would regret the day I ever met the dragon. The senator's daughter wasn't just making threats. 2 days later, Kwan Ho insisted on taking Zaire and me to a private gated park so Zaire could get some fresh air. It was a rare moment of peace. Zaire was laughing, chasing a ball across the grass, while Kwan Ho watched him with a soft expression I had never seen before. Suddenly, a red dot appeared on Zaire's chest. "Sniper!" Kwan Ho yelled. He didn't even think. He lunged across the grass, throwing his body over Zaire just as a loud crack echoed through the trees. I screamed, rushing toward them as the guards returned fire. Kwan Ho groaned, his face pale as he rolled off my son. Blood was soaking through the shoulder of his expensive gray suit. He had taken the bullet meant for my boy. As the medics rushed over, Kwan Ho grabbed my hand, his grip still incredibly strong. Is Zaire okay? He gasped. When I nodded, crying, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Then it was worth it. I told you. I would burn the world for him." The blood on Kwan Ho's suit had barely dried before he was back on his feet, refusing to rest while our world was under attack. One night, I followed a silent medical team into a restricted wing of the mansion. Behind a heavy steel door, I found a state-of-the-art laboratory filled with glowing blue lights and scientists in white coats. On the central screen was a 3D model of a human lung, Zaire's lung. "He's been pouring millions into this," a doctor whispered to me. "The dragon isn't just paying bills, Kaelie. He's building a cure. He wants to give your son a life where he never has to struggle for air again." I looked at the monitors, my heart aching with a mix of gratitude and terror. This man didn't just want to be a husband. He wanted to be a god who could fix the unfixable. But every kingdom has a snake. I noticed Kwan Ho's right-hand man, the butler, lingering too long near the security consoles. He had been with the family for decades, but his eyes were cold whenever they landed on me. Late that night, I saw him slip a small, encrypted drive into his pocket. He didn't see me in the shadows, but I felt a cold chill run down my spine. He was the one who knew the impenetrable codes to our fortress. He was the one who knew exactly when the guards changed shifts. By morning, the air in the house felt thin, like the calm before a storm that was about to take everything from me. The storm broke at noon. I was in a dress fitting, surrounded by silk and pins, when the alarms began to wail. I ran toward the nursery, my heart screaming, but the door was already hanging off its hinges. The room was empty. Zaire's favorite stuffed lion lay lonely on the floor. The security cameras had been looped. The dragon's fortress had been breached from the inside. A single note was pinned to the crib with a senator's seal, the maid's son for the dragon's crown. My world went black for a second, the air leaving my lungs as if I were the one with the illness. When I found Kwan Ho, he was a different man. He wasn't the calm billionaire anymore. He was a monster. He was throwing furniture, his eyes wild with a dark, terrifying rage as he loaded a rifle. "I will burn every house in this city until I find him," he roared. I grabbed his arms, forcing him to look at me. "If you go in like a beast, they will kill him before you reach the door," I cried, my voice cracking. "We have to be smarter. We have to be the shadows they don't see coming." For a moment, the dragon's fire flickered, and he looked at me not as his replacement bride, but as his partner in war. Kwan Ho's rage was a wildfire, but mine was a cold, sharp blade. I stripped off the silk gown and pulled on the dark tactical gear he had given me during our training sessions. I didn't need his army. I needed the knowledge I had gained as a nobody. I knew how these powerful men lived because I was the one who used to clean up their messes. I knew that the senator's estate had a service tunnel that ran from the old coal cellar directly into the nursery wing. While Kwan Ho's black SUVs created a loud, bloody distraction at the front gates, I slipped through the mud and the dark. I moved like a ghost, a mother hunting for her cub, my heart beating a steady rhythm of Zaire. Zaire. Zaire, with every step I took into the lion's den. The air inside the senator's mansion smelled of expensive cigars and old wood. I climbed out of the service lift, my handgun heavy in my grip. I found the room where they were holding him, a cold stone basement meant for wine, not for a child who needed clear air. The senator stood there looking at his watch, while two guards held Zaire. My son's face was blue, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe without his machine. The senator turned as I stepped from the shadows, a smug smile on his face. "The maid is here to collect the trash." He laughed. I didn't say a word. I raised the weapon exactly how Kwan Ho had taught me. I didn't aim for the guards. I aimed for the lock on Zaire's cage. Crack! The metal shattered. Before the guards could react, Kwan Ho's men crashed through the windows, but I was already there. pulling Zaire into my arms and pressing his inhaler to his lips. The basement filled with the smell of gunpowder and the sound of heavy boots. Kwan Ho stepped through the smoke, his eyes landing on me and the boy first. Once he saw Zaire was breathing, the dragon turned his gaze toward the senator, who was cowering in the corner. "You broke the only rule that mattered," Kwan Ho whispered, his voice vibrating with a lethal promise. The council of elders stood in the doorway, watching as Kwan Ho forced the senator to his knees. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I looked at my son, who was finally safe, and then at the man who had tried to kill him. I nodded once. I wasn't a maid anymore, and I wasn't a victim. The dragon's blade fell, and as the senator's life ended, the council bowed not just to the boss, but to me. The blood oath was sealed. The world knew now that touching the matriarch was a death sentence. The weeks following the senator's fall were quiet, but the silence felt different. The mansion no longer felt like a golden cage. It felt like a fortress I had helped build. One evening, Kwan Ho called me into his study. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes showing the weight of the war he had just finished. On his desk sat a leather briefcase and a single airplane ticket. "You have done everything I asked, Kaelie," he said, his voice low and raspy. "The senator is gone. The council of elders fears you more than they fear me. Zaire's treatment is working, and he is stronger than he has ever been." He pushed the briefcase toward me. "Inside is enough money to live 10 lives. The ticket is to anywhere in the world you want to go. You are no longer my replacement bride. You are free." I looked at the ticket, then at the man who had burned the world to find my son. I thought about the maid I used to be, the woman who hid in the shadows and lived in fear of the next bill. Then I thought about the woman who had held a gun to a senator's head to save her child. I didn't want to go back to being a nobody. I reached out, but I didn't take the money. I picked up the ticket and tore it into 100 tiny white pieces. "I'm not going anywhere, Kwan Ho," I said, stepping closer until I could see the shock in his obsidian eyes. "You said I had to walk into your heart or you'd burn the world. Well, the world is already on fire. I think I'd rather stay here and help you rule the ashes." The transition from the dragon's wife to the matriarch of the city was final. A year later, the whispers in the hallways had died down. The staff no longer bowed out of fear for Kwan Ho. They bowed because they knew I was the one who kept the peace. I stood on the wide balcony of the penthouse, watching the sun rise over the Seoul skyline. The neon lights were fading, replaced by a soft, hopeful gold. Below me in the private garden, I saw 2 figures. Zaire was running, really running, without catching his breath or reaching for his inhaler. His laughter echoed up to the balcony, loud and healthy. Chasing after him was Kwan Ho. The most dangerous man in Asia was currently down on one knee, pretending to be defeated as Zaire captured him with a toy sword. The scar on Kwan Ho's shoulder from the sniper's bullet was a permanent reminder of the price he had paid for us. Kwan Ho looked up and caught my eye. He didn't smile often, but the look he gave me was full of a deep, obsessive devotion that had settled into a steady flame. We were no longer a contract or a secret. We were a legacy. I leaned against the railing, the heavy diamond on my fingers sparkling in the morning sun. I had been a maid, a mother, and a victim. But as I watched my family below, I knew exactly who I was now. I was the woman who had walked into the dragon's heart, and together we were going to make the world bow. From maid to matriarch, I used to spend my nights scrubbing the blood of men. I didn't know off these marble floors. I used to keep my head down, hoping the world would forget I existed just so I could keep Zaire safe. But as I stand on this balcony, draped in midnight silk and wearing the dragon's crest, I realized the world was never meant to ignore me. Kwan Ho stepped up behind me, his breath warm against my neck. His touch was no longer a cold contract. It was a burning promise. Below us, in the private garden, Zaire was running his lungs strong and his laughter echoing through the air. He wasn't a maid's son anymore. He was the prince of an empire. The senator tried to bury us, but he forgot that some things grow better in the dark. Kwan Ho leaned in, his obsidian eyes locked on mine with that same terrifying obsession that used to scare me. Now, it was the only thing that made me feel alive. "They're watching us, Kelly," he whispered, his hands settling on my waist. "The whole city is waiting to see what the dragon does next." I looked at the $10 million ring on my finger, then back at the man who had burned the world to find me. I didn't reach for a mop. I reached for his hand. "Let them watch," I replied, my voice as steady as a heartbeat, because the maid is dead, and the matriarch is just getting started. Like, if you think Kelly made the right choice, subscribe and hit the bell to see the next chapter of The Dragons. Rain, share this story with someone who loves a queen who fights for her own throne.